Jose. Thank you. Yeah, so I think maybe we'll start the workshop by continuing along what Jose was prompting discussion on with us. We've gone through a number of sectors that will have obvious impacts on our economy if drought and heat will affect them. So we went from water resources, agriculture, livestock, energy, emergency response, colonias, workforce, the judicial system. That was one I hadn't thought about before. Fascinating, as they all are. And what other sectors have we omitted? And Jose was posing that question. And I'll start. I think there's another sector is that of ecosystem services, right? So if ecosystems are impacted in terms of their productivity and they kind of slow down or shut down or whatnot, what are those services that are no longer being provided for us? We think of all the services an ecosystem might provide: filtering water, sequestering carbon, providing food, which agriculture has covered for us. But that would be one example I would put out there as to what sector may we be missing in this analysis of impacts of heat and drought. And I wonder if people want to either expound on the ecosystem services or offer other sectors that we may be missing. So someone's talk.
Yeah, this is Robert Mace. Recreation, kind of thinking about Jacob's Well drying up, and and then the impacts downstream on Cypress Creek. Recently heard some numbers that are in the hundreds of thousands of dollars there. So, but then on the other hand, the tubing was off the charts here in San Marcos, in terms of the hot weather really drawing people out. But that could also be a function of just the increased population too.
Mm-hmm. Right on. Yeah, good points, Robert. Other thoughts? I would be surprised if everyone is completely satisfied that we've covered every sector.
Well, I did see, Robert Mace again, I've seen articles in the Austin American Statesman about some restaurants going belly up because of the heat, that people did not want to sit outside. And so restaurants that had a large amount of their seating outside or a substantial part of their seating outside were not able to do the business that they've been able to do in the past because of the high temperatures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I bet that's just one effect we might come up with of the excessive heat and drought on the food service industry. We want to characterize that as a larger sector. Okay, well, along those lines, I think one thing we may want to do is just sort of take inventory of level of interest on the part of people to take the next step on this, which would be to plan out a possible manuscript based on this theme of monetizing the cost of the droughts. And so I can share my screen. I will share with you a little outline I put together as I was just listening to everything. I'm just writing the outline here. I'm just finishing the outline. And then I will share my screen.
In the meantime, Jay, Ali Fars is sent me here in the chat. I'm not sure if Ali has some comment about the loss of urban trees and its relation to urban island heat index.
Sure.
Ali, you have. You need to unmute yourself, so you want to talk about?
Oh, thank you, Abella, for I thought that my my mic was disabled. There is a message that says disabled, so I didn't know that I can speak. So good morning, everybody.
Morning.
I thought it's I mean yeah, the drought. I don't know if you noticed. I don't know how it is in your part of the state, but I see lots of dead trees around our campus, around our neighborhood, etc. Those urban trees provide, as we know, good air quality. Also, they reduces the heat in urban areas. So the loss of those due to drought also would cause increase in what we call urban heat index. Also would have health-related issues or consequences. I'm sure I didn't check outside in the urban outside the urban area, but I'm sure in the landscape there will be also some dead trees. There were some numbers based on the drought of 2011. I forgot. I used to have the numbers with me last week. I had them, but and hundreds of millions of dollars the cost of those losses of trees across the landscape.
Yeah, those are actually there was Texas A&M did a satellite and ground truth with ground-based observations. They did a census of the trees lost in the 2011 drought. It was 301 million trees.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so the kinds of economics I do, which is way too simple. So I know I've talked with Sheila about this, Sheila Olmstead about this before. How do you monetize the value of a tree? Right, because the 2011 drought, everything you heard in the media was livestock and agricultural losses. 8.7 billion was that number that made up the really big 3-inch headlines back when there were still newspaper headlines and people were reading print publications. All right, that was the big number, 9 billion. And so livestock and agriculture, as we heard today, are obviously very important parts of it, but that was all you heard. And if you took that 301 million trees and then tried to place value on a tree, there's all kinds of, you could find almost whatever number you want of the value for a tree. But if you took one of the sort of lowball numbers that, with all those ecosystem services it provides, the things I mentioned, the things you mentioned, Ali, you could say $100 a tree is a pretty lowball average number. And so $100 times 301 million trees is $30 billion, which is 3 times the ag and livestock losses. That kind of puts it in perspective. But I know that the state of the art of estimating those values and those losses. I don't know, I think I talked with Sheila about this. Feels like about 10 years ago, I was talking with Sheila about this. And I wonder if anyone has any new thoughts on those lines and how we can, monetize the loss of a tree. Sheila, please.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to get my video to work, but I don't think I can. Sorry. I do remember that conversation, Jay, and I think it was probably 10 years ago. There are more papers since then. It is totally feasible to include those kinds of estimates. One thing that's a little tricky is thinking of summing across, right? I think if we were to to think about sketching out a manuscript, I think one thing I'd be very comfortable with is talking about all of these different categories of value, how they're, like what some estimates are in the literature, how they're done, and why it's important to think about all of them. But one thing that's challenging sometimes is not double counting, right? So often when you look at, a lot of the work that Patrick was talking about is feeding into broader attempts within the US to estimate, kind of more comprehensive, what we would call the social cost of carbon, right? And, thinking about, what's happening with heat and mortality and heat and productivity and those kinds of things, it's really important inputs to that. But if you were to take, say, some estimates on, human mortality, morbidity, and then add in, right, estimates of the values of trees, some of the papers and literature that value trees value them for shade and reducing, right, heat stress in urban areas and so on. And so you might double count. You'd have to be a little picky, right, if you actually wanted to try and add up numbers for, specific numbers for the 2023 Texas drought. You'd have to be a little picky about which number you picked, and that you weren't kind of counting across multiple categories at the same time.
Right on. Yeah. So, I mean, I naively ask you, Sheila, what's the new number for how much a tree is worth?
I think this reminds me of a study one of my students did when I was at the University of Hawaii. We did about buffer zones. We did a cost-benefit analysis, which basically is saying what is the cost of saving some of these trees, especially in the urban areas, versus the benefits we are going to get from these trees. And we found out, for example, from that perspective, we have like a 1 to 3. I mean, if you invest $1, you receive basically $3 back of benefits in the form of air quality, water quality, other things. So I think from the tree perspective, if we factor in the carbon sequestration, the CO2 function of the trees, etc., and other, you could find some interesting view to take a look from another perspective, from a carbon sequestration perspective or a clean air perspective. You could a different analysis, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Just one thing, now everyone is able to unmute themselves and participate. I don't need to give you access, and also that the chat is now available. In fact, Margaret Cook say there is also danger to dead trees lingering, especially during storms.
Hmm. Well, so to maybe seed further discussion, I will go ahead and share my screen, and let me know that you can all see this. It's just an outline, one slide on the PowerPoint. It's a outline. You can all see my screen, okay?
Yes, I can see your screen. Yeah.
Okay, great. So here's the outline, and it's basically just following along with what we heard today. The introduction would talk about the importance of understanding the drought, heat, and the impacts. We'd go through the actual data for how hot it was, how dry it was, the mechanisms for heat and drought along the lines of what John was sharing with us, and then the impacts by sector. And there's our discussion of what other sectors did we not hear about today: ecosystem services, recreation, and then the costs by sector, and then total costs and recommendations for decision makers. So yeah, I just really feel that the effort, it's worth going through this effort, even though it won't be straightforward. And we will have some areas where we have more certain estimates and some where there'll be high uncertainties on the estimates, but to go through it and talk about the potential range of costs, the high and low ends of the uncertainties, and to be able to have that and have it peer reviewed and be able to put it either it or some summary for policymakers, such as the IPCC does about climate change costs and policy and whatnot, to be able to put that in front of state level decision makers, and I think would be a really important effort. So I guess that might be the first question. I have other questions and issues, but the first question is this effort worth going forward? I'm going to vote yes because I just typed the question, and happy to hear what others think generally before we actually dig into it further.
This is Andy Dessler. I think this is really a good idea. I think it could be a very, could be very newsworthy. I would say, though, just from a logistical standpoint, I am sort of working on writing up my analysis for its own paper. But I'd be happy to sort of write a few paragraphs or contribute to writing a few paragraphs about it that reference my other work. But I don't want, if that makes sense, I don't want to include the whole analysis in a paper like this. Like probably just a summary of it, referencing another analysis.
Yeah, absolutely. That was sort of the norm I would expect per person, that they're working on the things that were presented today, or maybe others who didn't present are working on something like that. There would be some sort of cogent summary, a few paragraphs, maybe one key figure that comes from the other paper that we are working on in our own areas. To me, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. Once, if that's okay.
Hey, Jay, this is Marty Kelly with Texas Parks and Wildlife.
Hi, Marty.
Yeah, I think this is a great idea, and I don't know where this fits in. Kind of ecosystem services, also recreation, depending on how you look at it. But we track fish kills, and we tracked a number of fish kills this summer that could be attributed to the drought. Water drying up, water quality dropping, dissolved oxygen dropping out of the water, those kind of things. And it'd be interesting to put that number together. And I think that would be a good thing to include in this report you're talking about.
Right on, Mark. Good suggestion.
That group is meeting next week, our kills and spills team, and we call them the CAST, K-A-S-T. And I'll bring this idea up and see what we can do about putting all of that information together and coming up with some totals.
Oh, that'd be really cool. Yeah, thanks. All right, so we'll expect an email with the number next week.
All right.
It's probably not going to be that easy, but
it'll take us some time to.
Yeah, how much do you just say, here's a number? I don't think we want to do that. We want to have the beef, the science, the data analysis behind it. Say, here's how this number was derived.
Yeah.
It seems to me that if we were covering 12 different sectors, that could all be done in a cogent enough way in one manuscript, right, to bring it all together. And hopefully it points and highlights the work being done in the manuscripts that are focused on each of your individual work.
Jay, there is a point here about the implication or the impact across socio-economical, what you call a framework. Did it impact all the population the same way, or maybe limited resources people and so on were more impacted, or the same thing, maybe rural versus urban? Is there something around those? I think instead of a sector, economical sector or whatever, it's across another lenses.
Yes, this is not, this is just one way, one set of cubby holes. But as Sheila noted, we need to be careful of double counting across sectors. That's one issue. And the other is there's a different set of sectors, right? Social, so as you said, socioeconomic status and great disparities there, and pointing that out could be its own sort of section. And I think the colonias that we heard about were a really good example of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there could be different ways to divide up these bins, and for now, I think we start with, what are all the different ways we can do that? Put everything on the table, and then decide what makes the most sense. And I'm sorry, I'm not monitoring the chat, so if there is discussion in there, by all means, why not share?
I've just been spending the last few minutes poking around on Google Scholar for any studies that did a truly comprehensive assessment of the costs of drought, and I really couldn't find any. So I think this would be an important gap-filling paper, both for local understanding and broader implications.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Is this just drought, or is also drought and heat?
Yeah, we've been calling it drought and heat. I think a lot of what we heard say about emergency responses, emergency room overload, slower response time, the disparities in lower socioeconomic status neighborhoods. It seems to me like that's predominantly a heat effect. And other areas, it's predominantly a drought effect, perhaps, such as crops. So I'd say yes, both.
So maybe a better way to say it is kind of the exceptional summer of 2023, or the exceptional year. I guess it's not all summer; it's hot in the fall. The exceptional 2023.
Yeah. I started off thinking that this, when we first formulated the idea for this network meeting theme, that it would be 2023. But, the more I hear, not all the data is going to be in quite so soon for 2023. And that there is some value in looking at things where we do have the full accounting, like 2011, for example. So that's another question. Should this be about 2023 only, or whichever Texas drought heat excess that we have good data and data analysis for? And so, as John pointed out, this one, 2023, has these characteristics of the mechanism that may be a good analog for what's projected for the future. That would be one reason to just stick with it, but I'm sure 2011, there will be droughts like 2011 in the future, and they'll be longer lived too. So should we be, looking at whatever data is available for Texas droughts to make the idea would be, what's the best way to pitch to decision makers? Here's a cost when the next drought comes, and now instead of 1 year or 2 years, now it's 15, as the climate models are projecting. What will those costs be? So I wonder if there's a sense in the room of which way to go with that.
Well, I think we need to consider that there are some feedbacks also between heat and drought. For example, forest fires are usually worse and more dangerous when both situations occur at the same time, that is just dry or this just heat. So I think probably it's going to be much more difficult than just evaluate one of them, but definitely we can explore that kind of relationship between both, between heat and dry conditions, could be much more valuable.
I think for on the water resource side, at least for reservoirs, the supply decline starts in 2022. So that discussion will have to reach back that far.
Okay, but so Robert, since you're opining, how would you feel about looking at, say, including 2011 or wherever the best data are available for?
So the proposal is just look for the worst part in the record on each of these sectors and write about that.
No, look for wherever the best data are to be able to
Okay.
monetize it. Yeah.
I think there is one factor that is common with what we have seen this past summer compared to Uri, which is the compounding effect of extreme events. So, for example, like when we saw in Uri, you have a freeze and you have compounding effect of impact on energy, impact of and cascading effect on water, etc. I think this is another kind of compounding effect where we have heat and drought and the compounding effect on water availability, on health and other things. So I think these are the concept of a compounding effect is something to highlight.
Right. The synergies. Jose, you're muted.
Yes, Sayla is raising hand.
Sure,
Oh.
go ahead, Sheila.
Okay, I got. Okay,
She can't unmute.
she can, yeah.
She was asking in the chat. She was asking about are there attribution studies to show what portion of 2011 or 2023 droughts could be attributed to man-made component to warming. And I think for 2011, I believe John Nielsen Gammon, he didn't publish it. He had it on his blog, I believe.
No, Hurling et al. did a study of that. We found no contribution to rainfall and about 20% contribution to heat.
Okay, and for 2023?
We haven't done it yet.
Right on.
But I saw someone else's attribution, so.
Okay.
Andy worked up the numbers preliminarily.
So maybe mechanism, and if we're going to do mechanism, maybe also and attribution. So it needs its own paper, but perhaps some summary can be included.
Yeah, the NOAA attribution research team is looking at attribution for the heat, so they'll probably have something definitive well before we get any first drafts done, so we don't have to rely on our own attribution analysis.
Cool. Okay. All right, we have our first sign up for writing. Noah's going to be writing that part for us. Very good.
Well, I was saying we can cite them. Don't have to do extensive writing.
I'm teasing. So, okay. Well, in the interest of time, I'm sensing interest in doing this. A few people have weighed in that it's a good idea to do this. I haven't heard anyone say no, it's not. Maybe they've already dropped off the call. Given that, maybe the next steps would be for those who are interested to we could talk overall timeline. I think having this come out be something to be worked on in the first quarter of the year and come out and maybe be ready to have a complete draft in the second quarter of the year, something like that, 2024. If that's is that a time scale, and is this overall outline that works for those who are interested in seeing this go forward? And one way you could vote is by saying what section you would want to work on.
I think that sounds good, and I'm happy to work on the first two, water resources and agriculture.
Okay. All right, Brianna. Resources, agriculture.
Okay. Seila, okay with me. Happy to discuss how these different effects are monetized, if that is useful. Robert says that I work on water. Matthew Berg, I'd be interested in playing a role in ecosystems recreation.
Sorry, recreation was,
Ecosystems recreation, both.
yeah. Please repeat the name, Jose, I didn't catch it.
Yeah, sure. Matthew Berg.
Okay, and Sheila, maybe under this cost by sector, that's a key part of this. We haven't really defined how it's all going to work, but we'll start with Sheila there. And probably can use more folks there.
Okay, well, Marty Kelly will contribute to ecosystems and recreation as well. Margaret Cook, I can help on energy. 2 colleagues at Hark work on MBS and trees and 2 urban heat impacts. I check with them about whether they will be able to contribute. Well, Andrew Dessler is not right now here, but he told me that he's interested in collaborate, so I think you can ask him in the energy. Kijin Seon says, I would be interested in working on emergency response from a human cost perspective. John Osengamon, I can work on drought, heat, data, and mechanisms. Coy Collison, I am glad to be involved in ecosystems recreation.
Okay, Jose, you're going to have to repeat some of those for me.
Yeah. Where
Let's go.
Was the last one?
Recreation. I got Matthew Berg, Coy Collison, and I think you mentioned one other there.
Marty Kelly and
Kelly.
Coy Collison, also ecosystems and recreation.
Got Coy. Can you see my screen? Tell me what I'm missing.
I think we are fine.
I'm pretty sure I didn't catch all that you were reading. All right, while we're going back over the chats, other thoughts? Or if we missed it and it's not up there, please tell us.
Well, Lena, for the Colonia section, I would like to contribute and write this section. Although there is a more academic focused research than RCA RCAP is able to do. But I think we can still contribute with our existing work.
Got it, that's Lena, okay. Lena S, because I'll probably misspell her name. I go all the way.
Oh, that's perfect. I was only wondering, yeah, I just wanted to kind of say that there is in a way more research focused work, although I'm not sure if they have numbers really either. Could I confirm just internally before I kind of commit to participating? Because I have a tendency to easily commit, just to see if this is okay and then kind of confirm with you afterwards.
Confirming with RCAP?
Yeah, just with RCAP internally, that I'm not just... So that in a way we have kind of the hours and time to do that. Right. I think it should be possible, but I just want to double check.
Okay, sure. Me typing your name in a PowerPoint slide comes with no formal commitment.
Perfect. And did
Amanda,
we say...
Go ahead.
Oh, I still wanted to ask, I may have missed it, but what kind of scope for the impacts by sectors in a way do we envision in terms of text? Do we have like a guideline for that, or?
No, we'll come up with it, but I thought Andrew posed like he's got a full paper on this, and he'd say, well, in a few paragraphs, maybe 3/4, maybe a page.
Okay.
Summarize your sector, because we have about a dozen sectors here, and then plus, I would say, a key figure or table of data for each sector seems very reasonable to me. I think
Okay, thank you.
almost everybody showed one figure that I latched onto and said, yeah, that's key.
Amanda calls, I can contribute to urban trees ecosystem services.
Okay, great. Amanda Coles.
Ecosystem services. I think, well,
I think, let's see.
no, Colts is KOLTS.
AOLTS. Okay.
And
So
the other
also-
day,
Was it also Marty Kelly was from Texas Parks and Wildlife?
Marty
Yeah,
Kelly
AJ,
is,
this is Marty. Y'all can, and you can just put TPWD down for the ecosystem services and recreation. So it'll be myself, and I've got some other colleagues here on the call, Vanessa and Monica, and probably others that will contribute to this work. So
To both.
Yeah.
Okay, got you in
Yeah,
both
thank you.
spots. Yeah, thank you.
and I think that we can count with Patrick Berer. He told the other day that
Yes.
he was able to.
And yeah, he would do both that and the judicial system.
Yeah.
Jay, this is Ali. I can contribute to the number 7 recommendations.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ollie.
Welcome.
This is John. I can presumably help out with items 2 and 3. And I was also wondering, finally thought of another sector that might be relevant, which is real estate. How much does a severe drought decrease the desirability of living in a given location? How does that affect real estate prices?
I think that's really huge. I've been invited to talk about Texas climate change by boards of realtors, like in the Hill Country and other places, landowners that have never been invited by those groups before. So I think they're really starting to be extremely aware of this. The question is who would be a good person that would be able to help us monetize that.
I'm not volunteering, but I'll just note for the group that there was a study that came out of the Meta Center before my time that looked at impacts of live water in Cypress Creek on property values. It was an economic analysis.
Okay.
I can't remember who did that work, but
all right. So maybe yeah, another sector. Just try to squeeze it in here as real estate, and we need a person for that. Yeah, maybe if you could find that, Robert, the author of that paper, perhaps would be a good one.
Okay.
Well, I don't know how important is the tourist for tourism, the sector of tourism here in Texas, but I don't think people came to visit Texas during a heat wave during the summer, and summer is the main season for tourism. So I guess there is some economic cost for all the sectors that are dedicated to these visitors.
So is that under recreation, or should it be even bigger than that? It should be tourism, because it's recreators that come from other places. And so, yeah, we would need I think it's good. We could just stretch recreation or make tourism if we could find someone willing to weigh in there. Yeah, so I'm willing to work on some of the upfront and back end stuff like the recommendations. I welcome more people there. Happy to work on kind of the front end of things. Welcome more people there.
I can work with you, Jay.
All right, Ali. Great. Yeah, Jose, just let me know if I'm missing things in the chat.
Yeah, Margaret will says that the realtors have been key supporters of water legislation in the past. For that reason, we have talked and ask if this is business or industry generally incorporated in the cost section.
Is business for industry?
Business or industry generally incorporated in the cost section.
Just because those aren't categories that are included in the impacts by sector. I don't know if that was something that was assumed in the costs, and so that's why we weren't going through it in the impacts.
But if you think, Margaret, it should be its own call out. Like,
I mean,
water for business, water for industry.
Yeah.
And they probably have it monetized better than any other sector. But again, we probably want to look at avoid the double counting effects from different sectors. Yeah. Robert Bass, I wonder if, given your time with the Texas Water Development Board, if you wanted to be part of coming up with the recommendations for decision makers.
Yes.
Is there anyone we haven't heard from? Okay, is there anyone have anything to add or cautions where we may be going off track or timeline, any of it? And also, we could also start thinking about talking about venue for this. Like, where would it, what peer reviewed journal does the average state legislator read? That's no knock, not meant as a knock, but I mean, that tells us right there that right, it's a twofold purpose, right? One, for this to have the rigor of peer review, but then I think we're probably looking at, I don't know, whether we have to write a whole separate glossy thing. One thing we did, we wrote a white paper and it was in the Texas Water Journal. I believe it was issue 1, article 1 of the Texas Water Journal. It was after a meeting like this. It was before the Water Research Network. It was a meeting that the Environmental Science Institute at UT organized. We held it in the annex to the state capitol, and it resulted in a paper. A number of you are on it. I think we had about 12 co-authors on that. And it was something about Texas climate change and projections for the future, something about and recommendations for policymakers. And that we had a section, it was the first section of the paper, actually. That's what it started with. Here's the recommendations right up front, just so that it's something that could be used to put in front of a decision maker. So it's possible if we looked at that as a model, I'm happy to could share that link to that paper. That's something we could think about for this, because it kind of produced it was its own thing to serve as a handout by the way we put those recommendations up front. And maybe that's not the model to follow, given how the level of action that's been taken.
And also the message that we're telling you what to do. So
is that are you saying that in a positive or a negative way?
No, I think it could be taken not positively.
Okay, well, so open to suggestion, and it doesn't. We could, I think a lot of it is in the language we use. That here's what we find. You should consider it in policymaking, as opposed to here's what you should do. Right? That's always the fine line that one walks if they think their
Exactly.
science policy relevant. And so, yep. And speaking of that, I wonder if it's worth having either the reviewer or someone to weigh in. I'm not sure. I know there is now a pretty active climate caucus in the state legislature. I wonder if we kind of run a draft or these ideas by them, consult with them about what may be the most effective way to do this.
I think it's the way it is written would be key here, because I think what we would when I come across is like we're really an academic is the best place for that. This is what we think is opportunities and challenges with these type of things, and we need to be ready for the next one, because it's not going to be this is something is not when, I mean, if it's going to happen or not is when. So I think from the perspective of writing it, that we really want to be better positioned as a state to weather these type of things in the future.
Indeed. And I think that's the approach we should take. Easier said than done. Much editing required. Yeah, so let me actually take this.
Jay, can I ask a question? real
Margaret,
quick?
please. Yes.
Please.
Fully agree with the much editing required. But my question is, there were some pieces of this that were identified as needing additional analysis. So is a potential plan that those pieces that need substantial analysis would be potentially their own papers, and then this is a review paper. This one manuscript outline here is more of a review paper of information that exists, synthesizing it for legislators, or is it both?
Yeah, that's a great question. I kind of like Andrew's, putting his first question was, I'm writing a paper on what I presented. I could imagine putting 3 paragraphs and a figure into this. That would kind of be a summary of that. So to that extent, it's a review, but if it's coming out at the same time as other things ongoing, it's not purely a retrospective review, but it is more of a summary, I would say. And maybe some people also feel like the things they're doing are not warranting, they're not intending a full paper, but this is just the right venue to get out there weighing in on this. Like perhaps I don't mean to speak for the people from Texas Parks and Wildlife, but that's what it sounded like to me. So I guess the answer to your question, Margaret, is yes, it is both, depending on where things stand with each investigator. To me, I see the biggest challenge is we think those of us who work in these sectors have an understanding of the mechanisms, the natural systems, the processes. I think it's when it comes to monetizing things is where we have the challenge. And so I think we look to people like Sheila Olmsted and others, hopefully, to help guide us. Okay, I'm going to put in the chat a link to the paper that was published in the Texas Water Journal. And as I recall, John Nielsen Gavin was a reviewer, not a co-author on that one.
Sounds about right.
Hey, Jay, I made a comment, in the chat, but just so it doesn't get skipped over, technically livestock is part of agriculture.
Okay.
And I also said, should we have, an impact section for human health? We've kind of overlooked that in this list.
Yeah, well, except for the emergency response, but they are related, so public health.
And then I think it was, yeah, Matthew and Margaret suggested sorry, I'm getting lost. Public health and safety. And then including both physical and mental health in that.
Okay. And did that come with someone volunteering to cover that?
I don't think you want me writing that.
I was not volunteering you. Okay, does anyone have any recommendations? We have a few sectors here that don't have anyone associated. Public health and safety, including physical and mental health, business and industry costs. So thank you, Margaret, for suggesting those gaps. Can anyone suggest potential people, perhaps people not here, so you don't have to point fingers at anyone who's not here, but who?
I have a colleague at UT Health that works on climate impacts on health, and he might be able to point us to somebody that can help with the drought. So I'll ask.
Okay, Margaret will ask. Okay. On the business side?
I would expect that that's part of Sheila Olmsted's research. So if we could ask her first.
Okay.
Okay, Kijin suggests include emergency response inside public health. Not necessary to make another.
Okay. So this should be public health and safety and emergency response. Yes, it's okay. All right.
Just a formatting change that you accidentally put Margaret will ask a colleague as impacts.
Margaret will ask colleague, where did I grab that from?
The line above. It just got moved down.
Got it. Thanks. That would have been tough for you to do, Margaret, if I left it like that.
Just make up a new sector about my colleagues.
Okay. I would say feel free to follow up with any questions, thoughts, further suggestions on this, but I think for now, perhaps Jose and I will sit down, go through this in a little more detail and maybe flesh this out more and send a follow-up report before the break, and then maybe look to get together after people have had a time to think about it and provide feedback. People be willing to get together on a 30-minute Zoom call, say in mid-January, to see where we are on things. It's not a deadline for having written anything, but it would be a deadline for having thought about this further and be ready to put together a next level outline. How does that sound as a next step? No objections?
Sounds good to me.
Got a thumb up? I like Teams. You don't know where the thumbs up are coming from. They just appear in the window. Random, sourceless thumbs up. All right. I'm seeing nothing but thumbs up. It's not unanimous, but I don't see any thumbs down. So that will be our plan going forward. Jose, did you have anything else?
No, I don't think so. Just say thanks to everyone.
Yeah, let's hear it
Or-
for all of our presenters today. I learned stuff. I'm surprised by a lot of stuff I learned. I think it's been really good. Let's hear it for everyone. Woohoo. Okay, thanks. Thanks so much, everybody. This concludes the 11th meeting of the Texas Water Research Network. Hope you all have nice holidays.